or the torque, but this is what I'm using, 227. So let me back up a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and pull both of these covers eventually. This one here, this is for my primary chain adjustment. Now if you were to remove this cover before you drain the oil, if you had it upright on a stand like this, you'd probably have no problems. But if you're attempting to do this with it on the kickstand, or jiffy stand as Harley calls it, you would have some oil, a bit of oil coming out here. In order for me to pull the clutch cover off, or the Derby cover there, I'm going to probably have to remove this. I'm going to take a look at that chain, the adjustment first. Okay, I'm going to use a scale. This is part of actually a float gauge that I used to use when I did carburetors way back when. Set that up into that top chain. I'm going to sight along this edge right there. Take a measurement off the scale, and I'm going to move this up. All right. I got right at 5/8. Okay, so I'm at the maximum. I am not going to make an adjustment. Now, so if I need to make an adjustment, there's a nut right down here that I would loosen, and I would slide this entire mechanism holding the shoe up to tighten it, or down to loosen it. And in here, you can barely see serrations. And again, there's a bracket that's mounted into that cover. And then the back side of this shoe bracket is serrated. So I loosen the nut, move it up or down, tighten the nut, and it stays in place. Now, those of you that might have done this before on this style bike are noticing that this is definitely not what you have. This is not the stock adjustment. In fact, this is from an older version of a Harley. What I did to necessitate the use of this, I changed the compensator gear. I went one tooth smaller on it. I can't remember if I went from a 24 to a 23, something like that. But rather than changing the gear on the clutch basket, normally what you do is you decrease the compensator gear by 1, and you would add 1 on the basket gear. That way, the dimensions, the chain, is the same. You can reuse that, and you can reuse the original tensioning shoes and everything. But with this, I only replaced the compensator gear. As a result, the chain had too much slop in it. Now, I attempted to use a big shoe. Baker has a chain shoe like this, much larger, so it'll take up some of that slack, and I could never get it to adjust properly. I was just always beyond the maximum slack, so I ended up, I bought the old style tensioner. I actually flipped it over upside down so that I had enough room there, and that's why this looks different than yours if you happen to have a bike like this. A year or two newer than this bike, they went with automatic adjuster chains or adjustments, and you didn't have to get in there and do this stuff anymore. But all right, so there's a little bit of history and why mine looks a little different than yours. Okay, now at this point, if I wanted to fill the oil, I'd need to put the plug back in, but I usually just fill from right there. So I think maybe I will do that. All right, I'm going to put the primary cover drain plug back in. Let's see, before I do that, check to make sure that that O-ring is in good shape. And it does appear to be in pretty good shape. All right, I'm going to put him in. I'm going to snug him up. I'm sure there's a torque value for this. I would say I just reached it there. All right, so that is in. Now I'm going to go ahead and put some oil in here. Depending on, if you talk to 10 owners of these bikes, or for that matter, 10 people who maybe maintain them, if the owners don't maintain them, you probably have just as many opinions on what oil to use in this primary cover here. I attempted at one time, I did at one time, I used the same oil for all three areas here. I had no trouble really while I was riding in this area, but I took an extended trip, went in the mountains, had some temperature extremes, and did not like the way the transmission felt and the way the clutch felt. So at that time I was running the 2050 synthetic that I was running in the engine, in the transmission and the primary drive here. So once that happened, I decided I wasn't going to do that anymore. I took the advice of my favorite independent shop, Cycle Shack here in Medway, Ohio. He recommended to use this. So I've been using this for probably 50,000 miles or better, and actually a little more than that, and haven't had any trouble with it. So it works. I'll stick with it, and there you go. Now I just pour the entire quart in here. I think according to Harley, you are supposed to fill this up to the point where the oil just reaches the bottom of the clutch mechanism. And here is what they're talking about. So I need to look down in this direction to see where that oil level is. And for me, it wasn't worth the aggravation to try to change half an ounce or an ounce or two here and there while trying to see down there. So I don't know, good or bad, I just put the entire quart in there and I've had no trouble with it. Now, once I get this filled, I'm going to go ahead and put this inspection cover back on, but I'm going to leave the clutch cover off because I do want to adjust the cover, or the clutch. But before I adjust that, I want to finish up with the engine oil. I still need to pull the oil filter off. So I need to pull that off, fill the engine oil, and then I'll also fill the transmission. So then we'll come back to do this clutch. And again, the clutch adjustment, they want it to be done cold. So hopefully this will cool down a little bit more. Well, anyways, so I'm going to put the gasket in. Gasket should go in nice like that. It should only fit one way, I hope. I'll go ahead, put a cover in place. All right, these guys again are T27s. And again, there's probably a torque specification for these, but I'm going to put them in until they feel snug. And that's my way. If you prefer torque the things, you're not going to go wrong torquing them. Now, you don't want to tighten them down. You don't want to tighten one completely down, or at least I prefer not to do that. What I do is I'll take them all and I kind of alternate. you know, kind of go diagonal, or if you're thinking about it, skip every other one clockwise or counterclockwise. This way, set that cover down there in a level manner, I suppose you could say. That way I don't do any bad things with that gasket. I don't crush it in one place or do anything stupid like that. So, all right. Now, I have done this with just a driver. I mean, with just a bit on the end of just a screwdriver, kind of a handle thing. So if you get a pretty good grip, you can put them on like that without any difficulty. I have in the past, but again, for the purposes here, I'm going to show you a little bit. I guess I really should show you using a torque wrench, but you know, I don't do it on this. You did see me do that with the BMW. So BMW, some of those fasteners are a little bit different than this. So, okay.